he held the government of the province, his achievements were as follows. He reduced all Gaul, bounded by the Pyrenean forest, the Alps, Mount Gibena, and the two rivers, the Rhine and the Rhone, and being about 3,200 miles in compass, into the form of a province, excepting only the nations in alliance with the Republic, and such as had merited his favour, imposing upon this new acquisition an annual tribute of 40 millions of sesterces. He was the first of the Romans who, crossing the Rhine by a bridge, attacked the Germanic tribes inhabiting the country beyond that river, whom he defeated in several engagements. He also invaded the Britons, a people formerly unknown, and, having vanquished them, exacted from them contributions and hostages. Amidst such a series of successes, he experienced thrice only any signal disaster, once in Britain, when his fleet was nearly wrecked in a storm, in Gaul at Gergovia, where one of his legions was put to the rout, and in the territory of the Germans his lieutenants Titurius and Aurunculeius were cut off by an ambuscade. During this period he lost his mother, whose death was followed by that of his daughter, and, not long afterwards, of his granddaughter. Meanwhile, the Republic being in consternation at the murder of Publius Clodius, and the Senate passing a vote that only one consul, namely Gnaeus Pompeius, should be chosen for the ensuing year, he prevailed with the tribunes of the people, who intended joining him in nomination with Pompey, to propose to the people a bill enabling him, though absent, to become a candidate for his second consulship, when the term of his command should be near expiring, that he might not be obliged on that account to quit his province too soon, and before the conclusion of the war. Having attained this object, carrying his views still higher, and animated with the hopes of success, he omitted no opportunity of gaining universal favour by acts of liberality and kindness to individuals both in public and private. With money raised from the spoils of the war, he began to construct a new forum, the ground plot of which cost him above 100 millions of sesterces. He promised the people a public entertainment of gladiators, and a feast in memory of his daughter, such as no one before him had ever given. The more to raise their expectations on this occasion, although he had agreed with victuallers of all denominations for his feast, he made yet farther preparations in private houses. He issued an order that the most celebrated gladiators, if at any time during the combat they incurred the displeasure of the public, should be immediately carried off by force, and reserved for some future occasion. Young gladiators he trained up, not in the school and by the masters of defence, but in the houses of Roman knights, and even senators skilled in the use of arms, earnestly requesting them, as appears from his letters, to undertake the discipline of those novitiates, and to give them the word during their exercises. He doubled the pay of the legions in perpetuity, allowing them likewise corn when it was in plenty, without any restriction, and sometimes distributing to every soldier in his army a slave and a portion of land. To maintain his alliance and good understanding with Pompey, he offered him in marriage his sister's granddaughter Octavia, who had been married to Gaius Marcellus, and requested for himself his daughter, lately contracted to Faustus Sylla. Every person about him, and a great part likewise of the Senate, he secured by loans of money at low interest, or none at all, and to all others who came to wait upon him, either by invitation or of their own accord, he made liberal presents, not neglecting even the freedmen and slaves, who were favourites with their masters and patrons. He offered also singular and ready aid to all who were under prosecution or in debt, and to prodigal youths, excluding from his bounty those only who were so deeply plunged in guilt, poverty, or luxury, that it was impossible effectually to relieve them. These, he openly declared, could derive no benefit from any other means than a civil war. He endeavoured with equal assiduity to engage in his interest princes and provinces in every part of the world, presenting some with thousands of captives, and sending to others the assistance of troops, at whatever time and place they desired, without any authority from either the Senate or people of Rome. He likewise embellished with magnificent public buildings the most powerful cities not only of Italy, Gaul, and Spain, but of Greece and Asia, until all people being now astonished, and speculating on the obvious tendency of these proceedings, Claudius Marcellus the consul, declaring first by proclamation that he intended to propose a measure of the utmost importance to the state, made a motion in the Senate that some person should be appointed to succeed Caesar in his province before the term of his command was expired, because the war was being brought to a conclusion, peace was restored, and the victorious army ought to be disbanded. He further moved that Caesar being absent, his claims to be a candidate at the next election of consuls should not be admitted, as Pompey himself had afterwards abrogated that privilege by a decree of the people. The fact was that Pompey, in his law relating to the choice of chief magistrates, had forgot to except Caesar in the article in which he declared all such as were not present incapable of being candidates for any office. But soon afterwards, when the law was inscribed on brass and deposited in the treasury, he corrected his mistake. Marcellus, not content with depriving Caesar of his provinces and the privilege intended him by Pompey, likewise moved the Senate that the freedom of the city should be taken from those colonists whom, by the Vatinian law, he had settled at New Como, because it had been conferred upon them with ambitious views and by a stretch of the laws. Roused by these proceedings, and thinking, as he was often heard to say, that it would be a more difficult enterprise to reduce him, now that he was the chief man in the state, from the first rank of citizens to the second, than from the second to the lowest of all, Caesar made a vigorous opposition to the measure, partly by means of the tribunes, who interposed in his behalf, and partly through Servius Sulpicius, the other consul. The following year likewise, when Gaius Marcellus, who succeeded his cousin Marcus in the consulship, pursued the same course, Caesar, by means of an immense bribe, engaged in his defence Aemilius Paulus, the other consul, and Gaius Curio, the most violent of the tribunes. But finding the opposition obstinately bent against him, and that the consuls elect were also of that party, he wrote a letter to the Senate, requesting that they would not deprive him of the privilege kindly granted him by the people, or else that the other generals should resign the command of their armies as well as himself, fully persuaded, as it is thought, that he could more easily collect his veteran soldiers whenever he pleased, than Pompey could his new-raised troops. At the same time he made his adversaries an offer to disband 8 of his legions, and give up Transalpine Gaul, upon condition that he might retain 2 legions with the Cisalpine province, or but 1 legion with Illyricum, until he should be elected consul. But as the Senate declined to interpose in the business, and his enemies declared that they would enter into no compromise where the safety of the republic was at stake, he advanced into Hither Gaul, and having gone the